Today we're going to do a little more of a deep dive into the process of making the clock itself. Now, this is a pretty long story because the story begins from even before the founding of the studio, because I would say the studio was really created to deliver this in itself. Because I thought to myself while I was, even before I came to Pakistan and started the studio, I wanted to have like an idea already in mind to kind of get a head start. So I was in Germany at the time, and I was cooking up this idea in my mind, based off of my experiences making like Angle Jungle. I figured to myself, the board of directors were probably interested in something like this, because it had an educational supplement angle. And so hence I started cooking up around like December, maybe. The first picture I have of it is in December, about December 2nd, 2021. I think I met a goat and a white pelican that seemed to like me. There's a goat picture there. Those hippos. Finally. Okay, so it looks like around July 23, 2022. So, December to July 23. So I must have been making digital versions. I decided to make something a bit cleaner. And so I think I came up with this. And so if you saw in the picture before, it had like 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. Like there was all these random things on the table. The S on the left means start. The E on the E means end. I guess I was the empty slot in the middle. This was the very first iteration of the time gem, line in the time durations. The 1 hour at the bottom is like a time gem. And I don't quite know what the top was. I think it's supposed to be representing a 1 hour duration. Yeah, so the puzzle you're looking at is one of the very first, which on the left is supposed to be like 11 o'clock, and then on the right is 12 o'clock. And so I was coming up with these kind of digital form, and playing around with them. I think this was just one of these random abstract puzzles to really come to grips with how this is going to work. The problem was with this version is like it doesn't holistically fit together, so I had to do a bit more iterating in terms of thinking about like the UI UX experience of it, right? So though that was an abstract version, I think that came after the first jumble of mess that we saw initially, and this was May 29th, 2024. Here, right? So this definitely looks like the more formal versions of what I was working on back in Germany. So you can see some of the elements are similar, like if you have a look, this one on the left is a 10 o'clock. It represents 10 o'clock. It's a PM. You see the little blue thing in the middle, which is a PM. The L tokens means locked, right? The thing in the very center is the timeline. The 1 hour is the 1 hour token. And then the stuff on the right is the new time, which is 11 o'clock, and everything else is locked. So this was a very simple puzzle of the timekeepers on the left and the right locked, and you just have to put the 1 hour in the middle. So these were another version of the paper prototypes, right? You can also see the very first versions of what I try to do in terms of digital dials. So you can see the two rings on the outside. They were like, I was trying to be like very elegant about like how I did it, in terms of like double rings. So the outer ring represented like 24 hours and the inner ring represented the minutes. So it was kind of like going to be like you rotated like on top of it, right? The outer bit was the rotation of the digital and the inner bit was the analog. So this was one idea that I was trying with at the time. We didn't go with it in the end. I think I was lying on the floor when I took this photo. So, architecture and lighting was always really interesting. Okay, so then it looks like around January, in my mind, I had a little bit of like return to the clocks again, because, I did all my traveling, did all my trips, really focused on that, make sure that was done nicely, had a good time. Then in Pakistan, set up the office. It's like, okay, right, now let's balance my time between like, I don't know, hiring, office setup, planning, business plan, and also developing the mechanics, right? So here actually, it looks like we have a printout. I must have made a printout of some of the versions that I made in digital form way back when. Like the ones that basically I'd talked about while in Germany. Now I guess I was printing formally again. And these were ones that were kind of, if you go to the concept folder over here, they're like these ones, you see? So if you see these Dial V3 pictures, that's what's on the table now in Pakistan. But these were created during my time in Germany. And then what must have happened at some time is I got an artist in, and at some point in time I did a playtest. I can't quite remember when the playtest happened. This one's a little bit difficult because you have to think about it, right? So with this game design document, we like detailed all the things, kept them all here. Even initial AI generated like Mughal steampunk genie was there too. I had someone do UX of the game navigation flow. That was really interesting. So there's all that kind of stuff there. Definitions of how the rings would work, but that's all later. Actually, this came first. So with that artist that was with us for a while, I told them like, hey, why don't you first make me like a diagram that shows how this is going to work, right? So what I like you to do is just draw like a storyboard almost, and with some narration of like, okay, I go there, I tap it, it opens up like the puzzle, like the player does things, they solve it, it goes back in, and then the finish button appears. Actually, this loop is still in the game. So when the engineer was first looking at this before she started creating anything, she was using things like this, right, in order to basically make the game itself, right, before she was prototyping, designing it. Then eventually we did a play test with Bayview of actually sitting with the teachers and showing them a digital version. This was hosted on Itch, and Itch was our first platform we started using for digital play tests, and it's still there actually. If you go to Itch right now, you play the game. It's been updated there and there again, and we use that actually to play test in classrooms, and we've done that twice now. So between all of that, there's been a lot of different things. The initial art of the puzzles were really super basic, but I have a feeling we were just like, well, whatever, just put whatever art in there, get it working for now. I mean, these are what the current versions are, but they've really gone through a whole bunch. So I was describing to you about how they began in the engine, which was just very placeholder art. At some point we had to upgrade them, right? And so we split them out into considering what the digital side is and the analog side is. In terms of talking about this kind of asset, I think this was one of the first major iterations that we did on the clock itself. As you can see, there's an AM PM button in there that's still located there. There is an area which we wanted to leave for an animation for day and night. Maybe that'll make it into the game. You can see around the top of it, there is a frame. I wanted a Mughal feeling kind of frame, but it also felt mechanical, so she kind of had to go with that. You see the early attempts of making steampunk, it was just stuff at the top. I've recently been told in our endeavors to make it more child friendly, it's actually become less steampunk, so we may end up saying that we're not actually Mughal steampunk, but that's a thing that we'll have to talk about. You can see the digital dial up in the middle, right? This actually had buttons on it, and I think those buttons are going to come back. So we initially removed them, and we were like, oh, they're not elegant, and then people didn't realize they had to move the dials. We might put them back, so that's work that we're ongoing. You can see some of the heritage of the clock, that's still carried on in some of the designs and things. So that's there. Yeah, I think this was a document about how to make it seem like stuff was locked versus not locked. So we were already beginning talking about that ages and ages ago, I think, when we hired her, which was way back. So I think one of the next things that we really worked on were the dials. I think the clock hands itself seemed like a pretty fine design. The AM PM button seemed like a fine design, so we started with looking at the clocks, because as you can see, they're the least like elegant of anything, like from that particular thing. They're just like a slapped on thing, and I really wanted to do those well and feel like you can move them. So I believe what followed is attempts at different styles of dials, which we did. The design of the clocks was done through my experience working on Angle Jungle. Not design of the clock puzzle was through my experience of Angle Jungle. Basically, in Angle Jungle, I learned this technique, and it's not a very new technique, about basically like creating a Google sheet, after you've defined the elements of your game, and then trying to measure the difficulty of it as it increases, right? So for Angle Jungle, it was like gems, number of gems, and increasing number of gems, and number of moves you had to make a little bit. I think it was that, but there was a sheet I wrote for it anyways. Number of gems plus number of angles, exposure to angles. And then I created a Google sheet which had all these details in it. And then after I basically like defined a metric, like number of gems is proportional to difficulty, which, you can kind of assume. Then I basically like increase the difficulty over time. There was a video I did actually when I was at CMU where I broke down the entire design process for Angle Jungle, and that actually inspired me. And we still have the video; it's on YouTube and everything. And that inspired me in this, and it really influenced my puzzle design process for this game as well. So I won't go too much anymore in Angle Jungle. Let's go back to Clockwork Palace. First, I had to think about what the ways to measure complexity were, and basically I was making a bunch of different puzzles, I think, at the time, and they were just kind of ad hoc, and that would be fine for a while, but I felt like, okay, you need to design it so you're increasing difficulty in some manner. So and basically what I did is I created this concept of puzzle difficulty tracking, which we kind of look at each and every movement within the game as I designed it. So whether it be how many times you move the digital dials, how many times you move the analog dials, how many gems that you move, how many gems you split, how many gems you add, right? And how many gear multiplications that you do. Oh, whoops, that's a bit of a spoiler in terms of gears as a mechanic, but that's okay. It's fine. Somebody's watching this devlog, they'll get a bit of a spoiler alert, which is great. Or no, it's fine. MVP. This was the design for the MVP. So we actually had a playtest with Bayview. So I designed a set of puzzles specifically for the MVP. So this is the sheet for it. I think this is one of my first iterations. So you had start times, you had is analog locked, you have start time digital, is digital locked, all these details there. We even had notes of where the tutorials were going to go. We had tutorial design 2 in between all of them. So that lined up with the MVP. When the MVP was done, I did like a full-on monster document, which this is actually the design for the entire game, all the puzzles in the entire game, as well as start times, the end times, right? What the environmental gem states are, what I expect their puzzle state to be, when they begin the level, when they do each puzzle. So really it's actually a lot of design work. There's a lot of design work actually to make sure, to going back to your original question, to make sure that it's not repetitive. So we're looking at all the various facets of the puzzle, and you can see from these sheets they're there. It got to a point actually where I just couldn't visualize it anymore. Like, people are going to be really surprised that some of the later levels are so hard. I don't even know, haven't playtested them properly yet, so we're going to have to put them in the build. That I actually had to create a new a way of visualizing it. Otherwise I couldn't design them anymore. It was just too crazy. It was becoming too insane. And those I made in puzzle diagrams. And so what I did is I came up with puzzle templates. This was a puzzle template. So if a designer wants to come back and make more puzzles, they can do that using this template. This was done in Google Drawings. And then with that, I basically made the entire puzzle. Like, the reds are locked and the greens are green, and the gems, I don't know where the gems were. I don't think I had them around here. This was more just to measure the difficulties, not really look at what they have. I guess I didn't have that represented here for this one, in this particular puzzle. So there was that. So a whole lot of design went into it, basically, like a significant amount. We've only ever playtested three. On early access we have 4. I think we might have shifted some of the puzzles around back and forth. Like, one of the things we found from playtest, which was kind of interesting, was people preferred analog over digital. I thought they preferred digital, but no, the analog was more intuitive to use and easy to use, and we designed it pretty well. The UI UX experience of it, which is a whole thing in itself, we can actually call it a lot of detail of just how the analog was designed. Mathur can go into a significant amount of detail of actually all the little bits him and I worked on about this stuff, and it's done to such a thing where actually it's very nice to use. And so we had to swapped basically. Used to be digital first and analog, and then we swapped analog to digital. So it's the other way around. But yeah, going back to it, we actually have more content out on early access than we did a playtest for, which is kind of scary. So we might have to go back to a school and show it to them. And I fully suspect the kids are going to just get stuck, because they're going to... But it's kind of designed that way, because the puzzle design is quite nice in the sense that the puzzle is going to get increasingly harder. So you have 9 to 12-year-olds that are going to play it, and they're going to play it for a while, and they're going to be, oh, this is boring. And then eventually they're going to be like, what just happened? Like, this is actually more complex than I thought. Because like, if you saw one of the puzzle diagrams I made, like, actually you have like 7 of those timekeepers next to each other, like look at some of these are crazy. Yeah, I could. It's just a matter of my time and designing more. Like, I could easily add a lot more, and we have a bunch of systems that let me like easily add more, and the music can adapt around it too. I just kind of decided 6 to 8, like basically per level. I could also like you see like the puzzle we're looking at right now. This is like 7 or 8, right? This is 8. Just imagine the number of combinations I can make is infinite. Like, about like how many puzzles I could make, because I could add more puzzles. I changed the number of timekeepers. I changed the number of time gems. I named the number of timelines. So this game can extend to infinity. It's easy actually to make like infinite variations, because I can make infinite timekeepers, right? With the way the system is, and I could scale it very easily. The thing is, like, is that interesting? Like, we've talked about features like randomly generated too. I think we were talking, me and my engineer were like, maybe I could randomly generate ones, and I was like, oh, could you randomly generate valid ones? And she's like, yeah, I could work on something like that. So we're even looking at maybe even doing that in the future. So it's like time attack, or it's like you enter a level and the puzzles are totally randomly procedurally generated. It's very possible. Like, procedurally generation has gone crazy and things. This is easy to do. It's just we could do it as well here. So yeah, it's there's a lot of potential for extension. We even talked about time zones. We've not even touched that concept, right? Which is really interesting. And there are lots of other things we can do. So there's a lot of potential we could do with this game. How it would be structured in terms of logical solving. I thought to myself that we have the digital system, we have the analog system. Let's make an interesting puzzle matching between them. Then it was like, now we have that as a puzzle. We can have a lot of variations there. In fact, there's a huge space of just those types of matches. Because I thought to myself, I've envisioned a wall covered full of timekeepers, right? And I was like, what can we do? Okay, what do we put? We have like another timekeeper there, but now what's the relation between them, right? Okay, so we have timekeeper left, timekeeper right, and you'll see these already in very early versions in 2022, I think, even 2021, you'll see them, right? This idea was brewing for years now. And what we've done here is really just amplify it and polish it, like, but the heart of it was developed a long time ago, which was the clock system, right? In that, I was like, okay, how do I create a relation between these two things, like one on the left, one on the right? Then there it was like, okay, put the time, like what's the difference between these two things? What is one and what is the other? Okay, one is a representation of one time, and in the game, if you solve it, it could be matched, right? Or it could be not matched. Then the other is also a representation of another time, and it could be matched or not matched, right? But both are representations of time. Well, surely the way to relate them is a duration between them, time between them, right? And so the timeline was born, and the timeline was basically like duration puzzles, right? And so duration puzzles, and then from there Angle Jungle came back again, and it was like, okay, we should represent time as a quantity, because in Angle Jungle gems were a quantity, and everybody really liked that in terms of encouraging people to think about the angle system in Angle Jungle, and in this case about the time system. So we went further actually than what we were asked. The initial Bayview was just like, hey, can you just help us with reading time? We went further than that. We went, we're going to now do duration puzzles. It was never even a requirement. I could have just settled at just time alone, but I didn't want to. I want to make something look really interesting. Yeah. I think that I think it's a credit to the artist who was working on it. I mean, I did give her creative briefs of like, and actually, I would say natural language models have really been a help to me in this process. Helping me generate brainstorm ideas. I would feed it in the direction document. It would help generate things. I've been very transparent also about my use of natural language processes, machines, which we now commonly call AI nowadays, but it's not really AI. It's natural language machines. That didn't give the details, the artistic details. Perhaps were influenced a little bit by that, but it was really her artist who, like, she generated concepts by herself of what these rooms might look like after I gave her a creative brief. So the way the palace was defined a little bit was, I went like, okay, I want a palace and I want a companion, so the companion's got to be appropriate. So the companion's a genie, right? Instead of like Angle Jungle had a little like character that walked along with you, this was going to be a genie. So that's how the genie was born. I think genie is just a cool idea. It was just not that complicated how the genie was picked. In terms of the rooms, it was like, okay, we have a Mughal steampunk palace, and what's the narrative behind the palace? And so these natural language machines helped me come up with a few options. I picked one, refined it, and then we kind of found the narrative of the game. Then with the narrative of the game, I was like, okay, can you help me kind of come up with some rooms, like the different rooms in the game? And it generated a few ideas. I picked some I liked, I picked some I didn't like. And they gave me like descriptions of each of the types of rooms. I was really powering this a lot with natural language as well, but also my own feeling and influence. Then I would, once the artist was on board, I talked her through all of it, like all the rooms that we would have, right? I let her read the document. She wrote comments about it, right? She made some tweaks on it, I believe. Then we started with room 1. Literally, we began at the beginning. I actually think, did we start with cinematics first? No, we started with level 1 first, which was the gate. Absolutely, yeah, we started with the gate. It was the gate. And then we worked our way back. We were like, we need some cinematic stuff. And then once we had the kind of palace face design, then we worked out the slides that now are the cinematics for it, right?